The night was still, and the air was sharp, a cold that seeped into bones and lingered. On an ordinary street in Columbia, South Carolina, a light flurry of snow began to dust the roofs of identical suburban houses. It was the kind of night where everything felt on the brink of something, an unsettling calm before a storm. Inside one of these homes, a phone rang with an urgency that shattered the silence. "She's gone. She's not in her room." Mary Turner's voice trembled as she spoke to the dispatcher, a mix of panic and disbelief clouding her words. Her daughter, Felicity, had vanished without a trace, a girl who had known more homes than most people could count birthdays. Felicity Turner was 13, but life had aged her in ways that went beyond years. Recently placed into another foster home, Felicity had been trying to adjust again, but her spirit remained restless. Her mother's voice on the line was the first crack in the facade of safety that the foster home offered. The police arrived quickly, their presence adding weight to the air already thick with worry. Officer Jenkins led the initial search through Felicity's room. It was like many others, a space lined with generic comforts meant to make children feel at home. But Felicity's room felt different, as if some essential warmth had been drained from it. Jenkins began his investigation by speaking with Mary Turner, who stood clutching a worn photograph of Felicity as if it might somehow bring her daughter back. "When did you last see her?" he asked gently. "Yesterday morning," Mary replied, eyes darting nervously around the room as though Felicity might suddenly appear from behind a corner. The officers scoured every inch of the neighborhood, canvassing neighbors who offered only sympathetic shakes of their heads and murmurs of uncertainty. Inside Felicity's room, Jenkins discovered a hastily scribbled note tucked beneath a pillow. The message was simple but chilling. "I can't stay here anymore." Meanwhile, across town, another call came into dispatch, a report of two teenage girls missing from a nearby shelter, Monica Sharp and Ashley Lane. Both were known for their troubled pasts and frequent disappearances. The connection between them and Felicity wasn't immediately clear, but Jenkins knew better than to ignore coincidences. As media vans began to circle like vultures sensing a story worth feeding on, Jenkins faced his first roadblock: Mary Turner's reluctance to fully cooperate with the investigation. Her answers were evasive at best. It was as if she feared something more than just her daughter's disappearance. Days passed, with no sign of Felicity. Each hour felt like sand slipping through fingers. The more they searched, the further away she seemed. Then came the call that would change everything: a fire on Cardamom Court. Firefighters arrived to find flames licking hungrily at the walls of what appeared to be an abandoned house. But inside lay something far more sinister than they could have imagined: a body burned beyond recognition. Jenkins stood at the scene, the smell of smoke clinging to his clothes as he stared at what remained, a grim confirmation that this case was only just beginning. The body was confirmed as Felicity Turner's within hours. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. Fear mingled with grief as questions mounted faster than answers could be found. Who would do this to such a young girl? And why? As Jenkins stood amidst the chaos, his phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. A call from dispatch with information that promised to unravel everything he thought he knew about this case. The acrid scent of smoke still clung to the air, mingling with the cold as Jenkins stood before the charred remnants of the house on Cardamom Court. The call from dispatch had been brief but heavy with implications. The body discovered among the ashes was indeed Felicity Turner's, a girl whose presence, even in absence, sparked a storm of questions and fears. As firefighters continued their grim work, sifting through debris with methodical precision, Jenkins felt the weight of urgency pressing down on him. The community demanded answers, and the media's glare was relentless. He had only begun to scratch the surface of this tangled case, and already it felt like he was trying to navigate a labyrinth without a map. Inside the house, amidst the destruction, something caught his eye: a singed piece of fabric partially buried under a collapsed beam. He crouched down, carefully extracting it with gloved hands. It was part of a backpack, its insignia familiar. Felicity's? The thought was chilling. It suggested she had been here willingly, or perhaps she had been brought here against her will. Jenkins's phone buzzed again, breaking his concentration. "Jenkins," he answered tersely, still focused on the scene. "We've got something," said Detective Lane's voice on the line. "A witness claims they saw two girls fitting Monica and Ashley's descriptions near Cardamom Court that night." The revelation sent a jolt through Jenkins. If true, this could tie Felicity's murder directly to them, a lead he couldn't afford to ignore. But Lane's tone held caution. Eyewitness accounts were notoriously unreliable. Back at the station, Jenkins sat across from Mary Turner once more. Her eyes were red-rimmed from tears that seemed to have no end. "We need to know more about Felicity's friends," he pressed gently. Mary hesitated, her gaze flicking downward as if searching for strength in the worn carpet below her chair. "She talked about some girls, Monica and Ashley," she admitted softly. "Said they were like her, always running." "Running from what?" Jenkins asked, leaning forward slightly. "From everything," Mary whispered, her voice cracking under the strain of grief and guilt. Her words painted a haunting picture of Felicity's life. A cycle of flight from homes that never felt like home, and friendships forged in shared solitude and desperation. But were these bonds strong enough to lead to murder? As Jenkins pondered this, Lane entered with a file in hand, new information that could either unravel their assumptions or confirm their worst fears. "We pulled phone records," Lane began, placing several pages in front of Jenkins. "Felicity made calls to both Monica and Ashley's numbers just hours before she disappeared." The lines between random chance and deliberate action blurred further. Jenkins felt a surge of frustration mixed with determination. Every piece seemed connected yet disparate, a puzzle missing its key segments. Then another call came through, an anonymous tip about a possible sighting of Monica and Ashley at a bus station outside town, looking over their shoulders as if expecting someone or something to catch up with them. "How reliable is this?" Jenkins asked Lane after relaying the tip. Lane shrugged slightly, wariness etched into her features. "Hard to say until we check it out ourselves." The stakes rose as they prepared for what lay ahead, a chase that promised danger and revelation in equal measure. As Jenkins gathered his coat, readying for this next step in an investigation that seemed only to deepen into darkness rather than light, he couldn't shake an unsettling feeling that Felicity's death was merely one part of a larger narrative yet to be fully understood. But what truly haunted him was not knowing whether justice for Felicity would lead them towards resolution or deeper into an abyss where truth remained shrouded by shadows. The bus station was as nondescript as they come, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the faint smell of stale coffee hanging in the air. Jenkins and Lane moved through the crowd with purpose, eyes scanning each face for signs of recognition. The tip had been vague, but in a case where every lead felt like a lifeline, they couldn't afford to dismiss it. Jenkins' mind was a whirlpool of thoughts, each more unsettling than the last. Monica and Ashley were out there somewhere, perhaps even watching him now from the shadows of anonymity that crowded this terminal. The thought made his skin prickle with unease. As they approached the ticket counter, Lane's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her brows knitting together in concentration. "It's another witness," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jenkins nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle over him. Every witness was a potential window into the truth, or a mirror reflecting their own biases and fears back at them. "I saw them," an elderly woman's voice crackled through Lane's phone. "Two girls, one blonde and one with dark hair. They looked scared, like they were running from something." "Did you see where they went?" Jenkins interjected, his impatience barely masked. "They headed towards the buses," came the reply, shaky but certain. Lane hung up and shared a look with Jenkins, an unspoken agreement that sent them both moving swiftly towards the departure gates. The station's PA system crackled to life, announcing a delayed departure to Atlanta. Jenkins's eyes darted to the gate number displayed on the board, a possible escape route for two girls looking to disappear. As they reached gate 12, Jenkins's heart pounded in his chest. The crowd thinned here, only a few stragglers waiting for their bus. But two figures stood out, huddled together near a corner, their postures rigid with tension. Jenkins approached cautiously, Lane flanking him. "Monica Sharp? Ashley Lane?" he called out. The girls turned as one, their faces pale under the harsh lighting. There was no mistaking them, nor the fear etched into their expressions. "We're not going back," Monica said defiantly, her voice quivering despite her bravado. "We're not here to take you back," Jenkins replied evenly. "We just want to talk about Felicity Turner." At Felicity's name, Ashley's eyes widened, tears brimming at the edges. "We didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered, almost inaudibly. Jenkins felt a chill run down his spine. "What happened?" Monica hesitated, casting a wary glance around as if expecting someone else to intervene. "It was supposed to be just us," she confessed finally. "Felicity, she wanted to come too, but then something went wrong." "What went wrong?" Lane pressed gently. Before Monica could respond, a sudden commotion erupted from the entrance, a figure bursting through the doors with frantic energy, drawing everyone's attention away from their tense conversation. Jenkins turned sharply, reaching instinctively for his radio as chaos ensued around them. The figure, a man in disheveled clothing, hurriedly approached them, eyes wild with desperation. "You're looking in the wrong place," he shouted over the din, locking eyes with Jenkins in an intensity that sent shivers through his core. The words hung in the air like a tangible threat or promise of revelation, yet to be uncovered. A new direction that could shift everything they thought they knew about Felicity's death. And as Jenkins stood there amidst the swirling confusion of voices and movement, he realized this case was only beginning to reveal its true depth, a mystery layered with more shadows than answers. The man's warning echoed in Jenkins' mind as he and Lane maneuvered through the chaos at the bus station. As the crowd parted around them, Jenkins knew that whatever revelations lay ahead, they would not be confined to this place, these faces. The man's desperate eyes had said as much. Monica and Ashley huddled closer together, visibly shaken by the intrusion. Jenkins turned back to them, determination etched into his features. "We need to know what happened that night," he said, urgency threading through his voice. Monica's gaze flicked nervously between Jenkins and the exit, torn between fight and flight. "Felicity was scared," she began slowly, her voice dropping to a near whisper as if speaking louder might conjure something terrifying from the shadows. "She said someone was after her." The words sent a ripple of tension through Jenkins. "Who?" he pressed, leaning in slightly. Ashley hesitated, glancing at Monica for reassurance before continuing. "She got these letters. Threats," she confessed finally, her voice trembling with fear and memory. "She hid them from everyone." Jenkins felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the first solid lead that might illuminate Felicity's final days. "Do you know where she kept them?" he asked, trying to keep his excitement in check. Monica nodded slowly. "She had a hiding place, under a loose floorboard in her room." Jenkins exchanged a quick glance with Lane. This revelation could change everything. Back at Felicity's foster home, the air was thick with an uneasy silence as Jenkins and Lane entered her room once more. The familiarity of it was haunting, a space frozen in time by tragedy. Jenkins knelt beside the bed, fingers tracing along the edges of the floorboards until he found one that shifted slightly under pressure. With careful precision, he pried it open to reveal a small stash of envelopes, each one marked with Felicity's name in uneven handwriting. Inside were letters filled with venomous threats, a litany of anger and malice aimed directly at Felicity. Jenkins read through each one, his mind racing to connect these words to something tangible in their investigation. "Whoever wrote these wanted her terrified," Lane observed quietly from over his shoulder. Jenkins nodded grimly, his thoughts churning with possibilities. The letters added a sinister layer to the already complex narrative. They hinted at someone close enough to know her routines, her fears. Just then, Jenkins' phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Stop looking." The message was as chilling as it was cryptic. A warning or an ultimatum? He showed it to Lane, who frowned deeply. "Someone knows we're getting close," she said softly. "We need to trace this," Jenkins replied tersely, determination hardening his features. As they left the house, questions tumbled through Jenkins' mind like stones down a hill. each one gathering speed and weight as it went. Who would go to such lengths to silence Felicity? And why were Monica and Ashley so entangled in this web? The sun dipped below the horizon as they drove back to the station, casting long shadows across their path, shadows that seemed to whisper of secrets yet uncovered. But even as they prepared for what lay ahead, the specter of Felicity's death loomed large over their every move, a constant reminder that truth was often buried beneath layers of deception and fear. And as Jenkins sat in silence beside Lane, he couldn't shake the feeling that this case was leading them somewhere far darker than he'd ever imagined, a place where justice and vengeance danced dangerously close together. The text message on Jenkins' phone glowed ominously in the dim light of the car, its message as stark as a chilling whisper in the night. "Stop looking." Lane peered over his shoulder, her eyes narrowing with concern. This wasn't just a threat, it was a clear indication that their investigation had rattled someone enough to issue a warning. But who? And why now? Jenkins and Lane sat in tense silence, the weight of the message heavy between them. The letters they had discovered beneath Felicity's floorboard painted a disturbing picture, hinting at a predator lurking close enough to know her every move. But now, this new message suggested they were closer to uncovering something much darker. "We need to trace this number," Lane said finally, breaking the silence with a determination that matched Jenkins' own resolve. He nodded, already planning their next steps. The urgency was palpable. Each moment felt like a countdown ticking towards an unknown catastrophe. Back at the station, Jenkins handed over his phone to the tech team. The room buzzed with low conversations and the hum of computers working diligently to peel back layers of digital anonymity. As they waited, Jenkins pored over Felicity's letters again, searching for any overlooked detail that might guide them. Hours crawled by, each tick of the clock underlining their mounting frustration. Then finally, a technician approached with a printout, information traced back to an unregistered burner phone. It was little more than a breadcrumb on their path, but enough to push them forward. Meanwhile, Lane had been working another angle, Felicity's school records. Her efforts revealed something intriguing, a pattern of absences that coincided with each threatening letter she received. Someone had been watching her closely, knowing exactly when she'd be most vulnerable. "These aren't just threats," Lane mused aloud, her voice edged with realization. "They're timed warnings." Jenkins nodded thoughtfully, his mind racing through possibilities. What if these letters were meant to isolate her, to keep her away from something or someone? The theory hung between them like mist in the air, an unsettling possibility that lent new urgency to their investigation. Just then, Jenkins' desk phone rang sharply, pulling him from his thoughts. It was the lab technician with results from Felicity's personal effects found at the scene. "We found traces of soil on Felicity's shoes," the technician reported crisply. "It doesn't match any samples from Cardamom Court or her home." Jenkins exchanged a look with Lane, a silent understanding that this small detail could unravel everything they thought they knew about where Felicity had been before her death. "We need to find out where this soil came from," Jenkins said decisively, feeling the adrenaline surge through him once more. Lane agreed, already dialing contacts at local geology labs who might expedite their request for analysis. But before they could delve deeper into this line of inquiry, another call came through, this time from Monica and Ashley's foster mother in tears. "The girls, they've disappeared again," she cried. The news hit like a physical blow, two vital witnesses slipping away amidst growing chaos. As Jenkins hung up, a new wave of urgency washed over him. Somewhere out there were answers buried beneath threats and fear, a truth concealed by shadows refusing to stay hidden forever. With each piece of evidence pointing towards more questions than answers, Jenkins felt the case pulling him deeper into its intricate web, a labyrinthine mystery that promised both revelation and danger at every turn. And yet amidst this darkness loomed an undeniable certainty. Justice for Felicity was within reach, if only they could untangle these threads before it was too late.